Hey everybody, what's happening? Brent Axe here from syracuse.com, and we are live here on the syracuse.com Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page, and we are here presented by the Bill Wrap Superstore, and we're here in the early morning hours of Saturday following Friday nights into Saturday mornings season-ending loss, unfortunately, for the Syracuse University basketball team as they fall to Duke 69-65 in the Sweet 16 in Omaha, somewhere in middle America. Free throws matter. They certainly mattered for the Orange at the end as Tyus Battle goes 1 for 2, a very important stretch there free throw-wise for the Orange. And Duke answers on the other end. Gary Trent Jr. Hits 2 free throws down the stretch. So that's how we end up with a 69-65 win by Duke here today. So we are live. Thanks for joining us here in the early morning hours of Saturday. And yes, we are unfortunately talking about the end of the Syracuse University men's basketball season. And as disappointing as the loss is, I think a lot of Syracuse fans can recognize even in this moment, even in the minutes here following the end of that game, another hard-fought game by the Orange. A game that they certainly, for entertainment purposes, only covered the point spread. Duke was the biggest favorite in the Sweet 16 by, 11 and a half, 12 points, depending on, for what entertainment purposes only service you use for the point spread. And Syracuse did what Syracuse does all year. They actually were one of the few teams to hold Duke to under 70 points, not once but twice this year. But unfortunately, that did not result in a win either time Syracuse played Duke, losing at Cameron just about a month ago, 60-44, and losing tonight 69-65. So free throws were certainly a factor for the Orange late. Turnovers were a big factor for the Orange in this game. There were just too many missed opportunities at the rim. O'Shea Brissett missing some dunks, that lob pass and those inside plays that were working so well for Syracuse earlier in the game just didn't quite go their way in the second half. And Duke just managed to stay ahead of the game enough. Marvin Bagley Jr. inside was just too much for Syracuse to handle. Didn't dominate quite the way he did in the first matchup at Cameron Indoor Stadium, but enough inside plays and just enough second chances for Duke tonight. So just looking at some numbers from this game, you needed a big performance from the big three on the offensive end for Syracuse. They certainly got it from Tyus Battle. Tyus Battle with 19 points tonight. He was 7 of 15, 4 of 8 from three-point range, but we mentioned 1 of 3 from the free throw line, including the big miss at the end there. O'Shea Brissett overcame a really tough first half. Still not a great night on the offensive end, though. 5 of 15 overall. He didn't connect from three-point range. Syracuse only with 4 total three-pointers in this game. Pardon me. O'Shea with 15 and 7 rebounds in this game. Eric Dolezaj couldn't have played any better. And, was limited minutes-wise, unfortunately, because he got into foul trouble, but played a lot of the second half and managed to avoid fouling out. He actually didn't pick up a foul after getting that third foul and having to sit out. He finishes with 13 points on the night, 6 of 8 from the field, just doing a great job. Duke left him open, and when Duke left him open, he was hitting those shots. Pascal Chukwu kind of tailed off a bit once he got into foul trouble, but, terrific around the rim for the most part for Syracuse with 8 points and 7 rebounds. Frank Howard really struggled tonight. Syracuse needed their big three to score and be big in this game, and Frank Howard just unfortunately, he had 8 rebounds in this game, which actually led the team. So he contributed there, but just 6 points. He was 1 of 6 from the field. He was 4 of 5 from the free throw line, and again, he rebounded tonight, but that's not what you want your point guard to do. You want your point guard to score and to lead and to dish out assists, which tonight he did have 5 assists. Turned the ball over 4 times, though. Certainly not a great game for Frank Howard. A couple of really key turnovers for the Orange in this game. Frank Howard with a couple lob passes that didn't connect. Matthew Moyer had a few turnovers in the time that he came in to spell Eric Dolezaj when he was in foul trouble. So unfortunately, some turnovers, certainly costly for Syracuse. They had 16 in this game. They had 17 when they went to Cameron, and that really cost them. Duke turned the ball over just 7 times in this game. And as for Duke, Marvin Bagley III, 22 points inside. He was 8 of 12 from the field, 6 of 8 from the free throw line. He averages a double-double. He didn't have a rebound until I believe the early part of the second half of this game, or maybe towards the end of the first half. He ends up with 8 rebounds, but Wendell Carter certainly made up for the rebounding end there for Duke. He had 14 points and 12 rebounds on the night. And, Syracuse once had a pretty sizable rebounding gap in this game. They did win the rebounding battle 37-33. Duke cut that, though. Syracuse really had a huge rebounding edge in this game. But as the second half kind of went along and Carter and Bagley and even some of the guards were grabbing some rebounds, they cut that down. Grayson Allen was 3 of 14 from three-point range. He couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat shooting-wise, but he had 8 assists, and he made the right plays defensively. He made the right passes when necessary. So Grayson Allen kind of burned Syracuse there. Gary Trent Jr., a terrific game as well for Duke. He had 14 points on the night, including a 5 of 13 shooting and the big free throws at the end. So a disappointing loss in one sense, but not disappointing in this. Who would have thought, as we were going through the ACC season and how Syracuse had to fight, scratch, and claw its way just to stay in the conversation. They were the last team in the tournament. And, a lot of experts, the Doug Gottliebs of the world and some of the people out there in the college basketball universe saying that Syracuse didn't even deserve a bid in the tournament. And all they did was take that chance and get to the Sweet 16 and took on a Duke team and gave Duke as hard of a battle as they've certainly had in this tournament and as hard of a battle as Duke has had really going down the stretch. North Carolina gave them some tough games, even beat them in the ACC tournament. But, this Syracuse team is one that I think fans will be universally proud of, that they certainly overachieved, that they certainly, overcame the odds, that they certainly, wrote a great story. You only had 7 players on this team. You start at the beginning of the season when Torian Thompson left Syracuse and transfers to Seton Hall before, barely the semester began. And then the Orange start the season and only get a few games in, and you lose Geno Thorpe at the guard position. He leaves the team. Howard Washington Jr. gets hurt as Syracuse enters ACC play. Barama, almost had to medically redshirt because of his knee tendonitis, but he hangs in there and guts it out. Not only Barama, but Pascal Chukwu plays hurt for a lot of the year. Tyus Battle, Frank Howard, O'Shea Brissett, all playing 40 minutes a game. Merrick Dolzaj, it's funny, I interviewed Jim Boeheim, I think it was in May of last year when they, brought in Dolzaj as a transfer, and Jim called him that kid from Czechoslovakia. He couldn't even remember, what his name was and what country he was from. It was the wrong country. He's from Slovakia. He goes from the skinny kid from, Czechoslovakia to a guy who was huge for Syracuse in postseason play, not only in the NCAA tournament, but the ACC tournament and really down the stretch. So now I think if you're a Syracuse fan, as much as it, you almost had Duke in a way. And, there's some things that we can look at and say, turnovers and free throws and some things cost you in this game. For this team to make the Sweet 16, given the circumstances of the season, given that they barely got in the tournament and some games down the stretch that they lost that they needed to win, they certainly beat Clemson at the end of the regular season to, kind of ensure, being in the conversation on the bubble. I think you've really got to be encouraged by what you saw from this team generally. I think that's going to be the overriding feeling from this. A lot of fans knew that they were kind of playing with house money, and finally the house came and said, okay, you got to leave the villa. It's like being one of those whales in Vegas, and you're just in the best villa in the casino for like 2 weeks, and you just keep cleaning up, and you just keep hitting 21 with house money, and finally the casino said, okay, you got to go because we got to make room for Duke. But the Orange made one heck of a run, and now, of course, the early thought is next year. And you think about the offseason, and you think about, okay, Tyus Battle, who in ESPN's latest mock draft is a first-round selection. He has moved up the chart. Now, the scout that I talked to, I call him the scout who knows, because he's been pretty accurate in judging where Syracuse players are going to go in the draft. He doesn't agree with that assessment. He doesn't think Tyus Battle would go in the first round if he came out this year. But look, that's what individual workouts are for. He'll go through the process, I'm sure, and make a decision based on that. I don't think he's going to leave right away. I don't think he should leave right away. I think he should test the waters. I think he should do what a player has the opportunity to do, and that's you go through the workouts and you talk to people who know, and they give you an assessment, and they say, this is what your NBA value is. But if Tyus does come back, with the team that will have Frank Howard back, O'Shea Brissett back, Merrick Dolezaj back, everybody from this team. They didn't have a significant senior leaving this team, with no offense to our friend Braden Bayer, who was, fun to watch this year when given the opportunity. Now you add Darius Basley to the mix, who's a top 10 recruit on some rankings. He is one of the highest rated recruits Syracuse has had since Carmelo Anthony. That's pretty weighty company there. You had a 4-star guard in Jalen Carey. You had Buddy Boeheim to the mix. You had Elijah Hughes off the bench, who, remember, transferred from East Carolina and couldn't play this year due to transfer rules. And all of a sudden, you got a really deep team who made a Sweet 16 run and gave Duke a little bit of a push here in the tournament. You could be looking at a preseason top 10 team, I dare say, next year, certainly preseason top 15 team. So, look, this team squeezed every drop out of this season that they could get, and the future looks bright. So you got to feel really, really good about Syracuse and the future of Syracuse basketball, where things are going. You always have to prepare for a little bit of the unknown in the offseason, players leaving or transferring or things of that nature. We'll kind of see how that goes. But this is you go from a depleted roster to a deep roster next year. So all told, the future looks bright. This team completely overachieved, and Syracuse fans just got to feel really good about all things in general. Now, again, this game, the foul calls, I'm seeing some of you guys make some comments about the foul calls in this game. It did even out a little bit. Certainly was weighted heavily in favor of Duke in the first half. But the reason that was, they missed a few. Let's be honest. The refs missed a few calls here. But the reason it was kind of weighted more heavily in Duke's favor was they were just moving the ball around, and Syracuse was playing catch-up. But you got to be fair and look at, once the second half started, that weighed the other way. And when you look at the free throws overall, there's a reason free throws matter, kids. Syracuse was 20 of 28 from the free throw line. That's 71%. Duke was reverse that. I'm sorry. Syracuse was 11 of 17. That's 64%. The big miss by Tyus Battle at the end, a couple other key misses down the stretch for the Orange. Duke was 20 of 28. That's 71%. Wendell Carter Jr. was 8 of 11. Marvin Bagley III was 6 of 8. Grayson Allen was 4 of 5. So they had some guys miss some free throws, but it was Gary Trent Jr. who made the key free throws at the end. Tyus Battle missed that one free throw at the end, and he's one of their best free throw shooters. He's a guy who's been very reliable at the free throw line, and so that'll sting that, Tyus had that chance at the end there, but there's time on the clock. Duke would have had a possession the other way anyway. Syracuse would have to foul, and, perhaps it's not that big of an issue as you would think it is at this point. But, a lot of people were focusing on the foul calls and some things that were happening there, but that evened out in the sense that, boy, it was interesting when Grayson Allen was just chucking up threes. Possession after possession, he missed about 6 in a row before he finally pump fake, took the ball inside, and hit a jump shot down the stretch. Marvin Bagley Jr.'s got 22 points, finished with 22 points. He's tearing it up, and Grayson's just chucking up threes. Syracuse kind of gave him that long-range shot, and he wasn't connecting. What Duke did in the second half looked a lot more. Remember that first half of the Syracuse-Duke game at Cameron where they combined to go 0 for 20 from three-point range? Duke finished 5 of 26 from three-point range in this game, which obviously is not very good. It's 19%. It's about as bad as they shot in the first game when they went 2 of 18. The issue for Syracuse was they didn't answer on the three-point, and they only connected on 4 total, and Tyus Battle hit all 4 of those. So he didn't get any from O'Shea. He didn't get any from Frank. He didn't get any help on that end, and, Duke just took advantage. Syracuse backed off. They ended up with 14 offensive rebounds on the game, which is pretty darn good against Bagley and Carter and those guys inside. A huge bulk of that, though, came in the first half. The offensive rebounds really tailed off in the second half. Duke's rebounding disparity was very interesting because it was pretty even. They had 33 overall rebounds, 16 on the offensive end, 17 on the defensive end. So, in games like this, Duke just had a little bit better of an inside game. They made some key plays down the stretch. Syracuse was playing catch up the whole second half, and little things like missing free throws. O'Shea Brissett, Pascal Chukwu, a couple of plays at the rim. Syracuse, we mentioned Frank Howard with just some key turnovers and some plays. You just cannot give away possessions against a team like Duke. And lo and behold, It ends up being a 4-point game. It was interesting to see Duke play the zone. They had just started the switch to the zone when Syracuse played there at Cameron back on February the 24th. And I don't think it really affected Syracuse in the sense of, really kind of affecting the offensive flow of this game, because Syracuse only took 13 3-pointers. They only made 4. Dolja was getting a lot of open shots that he took advantage of. Tyus Battle, we mentioned the free throw thing, which is unfortunate for him, but he was their best offensive player. O'Shea was getting to the rim, but I think one problem that O'Shea Brissett had in this game tonight was he was trying to draw contact a little bit too much instead of just shooting the ball and getting the foul that way. He was kind of leaning in, and that's something he's done all year, so I really don't blame him for doing it in one sense, but and certainly he was told this during some timeouts, to not do that, to not try and draw the contact, just get in there and shoot the ball. And, that was a little bit of a problem for him. Didn't really finish at the rim as well as he has been in some other games in this postseason. So it was a lot of little things like that add up for this team. And lo and behold, the Orange bow out a 4-point loss to Duke tonight. Let's hop in the comments, shall we? Let's see what you guys are saying here. Jeff noting that Duke has 5 guys going in the NBA. Yeah, they do. Marvin Bagley Jr., Wendell Carter, they're top 10 picks. I think both Duval and Trent are going to be picks, probably either just at the tail end of the lottery or just outside of it. Grayson Allen's a first-round pick. I don't think he's going to slip into the lot. It's interesting. If he went maybe even last year or the year before that, he would have been a lottery pick. I think he slipped out of the lottery, but they're all going. I mean, Duke has become the standard, along with Kentucky, of one-and-done players. And it's interesting. We brought up, okay, now the big off-season question focuses on Tyus Battle. Well, you look at the list of schools that have put the most consecutive first-round picks in the NBA. That list goes Kentucky, Duke, Syracuse. Syracuse is third on that list, 6 consecutive years. I believe Duke's 7 and Kentucky's 8. So while Kentucky and Duke are known as being the one-and-done, schools and pumping all those NBA players to the league from college, Syracuse, not always one-and-done players, because, last year it was Tyler Lydon, who was a 2-year guy, but their streak of putting players in the NBA is only matched or topped by Kentucky, who lost to Kansas State, which is unbelievable, by the way. Tomorrow we're going to see a 9-seed playing 11 seed to get into the Final Four. And, I mean, at this point, let's go Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago, right? Who doesn't want to root for that other 11 seed to get in the Final Four? I mean, you want Kansas State to get there? I mean, that's boring. Who cares about that? If Kentucky's gone, if the Blue Bloods are out, now you got Kansas playing Duke in Omaha on Sunday. That's going to be one heck of a matchup. And all those Kansas fans that were there, I'm sure you guys noticed that. And, Syracuse had that crowd. Who's rooting for Duke if you're not a Duke fan, right? Kansas was certainly rooting for Syracuse to knock out Duke. They probably saw Syracuse as an easier out on Sunday, but they are going to have a huge, huge crowd in Omaha, as they should. They're the number 1 seed, but, Duke and Kansas, that should be a great game, Elite Eight game on Sunday. But you got an interesting mix of, Villanova won tonight, and the teams that have been in Final Fours won national championships in recent years. Villanova, Duke, Kansas still hanging around. Kentucky's out. And you got Loyola Chicago and Kansas State and some of these really interesting teams that have made their way through, which just goes to show you, you might as well just take your bracket and, put it in the shredder as opposed to put it in the office pool, because it's just as good, right? Let's see. Steph says, Brent, how can you call a game and not know how to pronounce the names? Nance was horrible. Yeah, I was really surprised at that, Steph, because Jim Nance is as consummate a professional as there is. That guy really knows his stuff. He preps ahead of time, and those are some tough names if you're just kind of parachuting in and haven't done a Syracuse game. But he did correct them as the game went along. I'll give him credit for that. But I was really surprised to see that, just because, Nance is as good as it gets when it comes to prep work, when it comes to being a college basketball announcer. He knows his stuff, and he checks on those things. So I was kind of surprised to hear that myself. Dan saying this is Boeheim's best coaching job, in my opinion. Dan, if it's not, it's in the top, 3 or 4? That'd be a good article, or maybe I'll do a video on that here on syracuse.com, that at the offseason and the reality of that is settling in. Where would you put this among Jim Boeheim coaching jobs, because it's one thing to take a team loaded with talent and live up to expectation. It's quite another to take a team that at the beginning of the season was not expected to be big. I mean, I'll go back to my preseason prediction here on syracuse.com. I said they'd be 19-12 and would just miss the tournament. Well, that was pretty much spot on in terms of number of wins before the postseason, but they barely got in the tournament, and they just proved all you need is a shot, especially if you're Syracuse and you can play that zone defense and, even win 3 games in 5 days, beating Arizona State, TCU, and Michigan State, holding them to season lows. All Syracuse needs is a shot with that 2-3 zone to get in, to mystify some teams and make their way through the tournament the way that they did. But to lose the players that they did, to have the injured players that they did, Boeheim only plays 7 or 8 guys, even if he's got a deep roster. But all things considered, to get this team to the Sweet 16 and have the opportunity they did, this is unquestionably one of Jim Boeheim's best coaching jobs. I don't think you can, go further than the top 5 if you really go through. And that's 42 years of coaching we're talking about here. So I'm sure we'll examine that a little more closely in the offseason, but there is no doubt this is one of his best coaching jobs. And, they hand out the coach of the year before the postseason, and you can kind of debate whether or not that's something they should do. If they handed it out once the postseason kind of settled in, I think Boeheim would get a heck of a lot more votes than he did this year. Great job by him. There's no question about it. There's something about those Jim Boeheim teams that are underdogs, that are not expected to do much, that kind of come out of the shadows, right? That's been a very interesting thing over the years. And I don't know if you guys caught this. There was a great article on 538.com, which is kind of an ESPN subsite. And they actually looked at the numbers and broke it down based on, coaches and teams that win games that they're not supposed to. You kind of win up, and not necessarily upsets, but just, statistically games that you're not supposed to win. And Jim Boeheim came out on top. Tom Izzo won that for a number of years, but Boeheim is actually number 1 on that list now. It's a really interesting article. You can check that out, which kind of backs up that feeling we've always had as Syracuse fans, that underdog team tends to do better. Even the Carmelo Anthony team, which we quickly discovered how good he was and how good that team was, they weren't ranked to start the season. The 96 Final Four team that came out of nowhere, those teams typically do better. Tony saying that Brent, ESPN Insider, already with an article up on SU's potential for 2019. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the opposite of this year. They're not sneaking up on anybody next year with that heralded recruiting class. And, let's just you don't want to assume anything because the season just ended a half hour ago. But you get everybody back from this team and add to that recruiting class, it's going to be hard to keep Syracuse out of a preseason top 10. Jack saying a classic Boeheim presser, short and miserable. Yeah, I missed that because we were here doing the Facebook Live. I'll check that out when we're done. Yeah, I can imagine, though. Can imagine not in the best of moods. Always interesting to see Boeheim go against Krzyzewski in the face-off there. 2 great friends, of course, the Olympic coaches together, and those guys are best friends and long-time coaching comrades, if you will, long-time coaches at their schools, and the 2 winningest coaches in college basketball history, despite what the NCAA will tell you about taking away wins. So good note there, Jack. We'll certainly check that out while we're writing the recap here late into the night or early in the morning, if you prefer. Mike saying underdog history in the tournament started in 75 when Syracuse beat North Carolina in the Elite Eight. Yeah, Rudy Hackett and Jimmy Lee and the boys. Let's see. Yeah, Steph, we went over that. Jim Nance was bad, but he fixed the problem. He got over that. You've said that like 5 times now. We got it. We got the message. Heather says, of course, Boeheim's going to be miserable right now. At this point, I'd be disappointed if it went anyway. I mean, Jim's competitive. He's as competitive as they come, and they're putting him in front of a microphone 10 minutes after what, from a coaching standpoint, he's got to be pretty disappointed at the turnovers. He's got to be pretty disappointed, the free throw losses, some of the possessions that they kind of gave away. I mean, they were in this game. They had it. They didn't completely bring Duke down to their level in terms of pace, much more in the second half than the first half. But, Syracuse, the first half was a much more active game, and Syracuse kept in it. It was just, a few of the possessions that didn't go their way. We mentioned those shots at the rim and a few things they gave away, and, it all adds up in a 4-point loss. So I could see from a coaching standpoint right now why he'd be disappointed. But Boeheim certainly has said throughout the year that this team's given him everything they have. And he is as proud as this team as any. I don't know if he said that tonight. I don't know if the competitive juice has got the best of him. Again, I haven't seen the presser because we've been here doing the Facebook Live thing. But all told, I think when the dust settles here and he really circles back on this team, he'll have nothing but good things to say about the season and the team overall. A lot of you are asking if anybody will leave. I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I usually have a pretty good read on these things. I knew Tyler Lydon was going, and you kind of knew Malachi Richardson was going the year before that. Certainly knew Tyler Ennis was going in 2014. I was surprised that Chris McCullough left in 2015 because he had only played, 17 games before he got hurt, something like that. Usually I got a pretty good read on these things. And again, and this is right now, okay? This is March 24th now. We've moved into Saturday. And he's got to go through the workouts. He has to go, and we're talking about Tyus Battle, of course. O'Shea's not going to leave. I would be very surprised if O'Shea Brissett chose to leave this team or even go through the NBA workout process, which he has every right to do. But if I had to guess, I think Battle's going to go through. He's going to get some feedback, and I think he's going to be back next year. That's just a guess on my part. I know he wants to play in the NBA. He believes he can go to the NBA. He's now a first-round pick according to some projections. But the scout I talked to is very doubtful that he can be a first-round pick this year. He thinks he needs to come back. But we'll see. Weirder things have happened, and Syracuse has a pretty good track record in the last 6 years of getting players into the league. So I'll tell you what, guys, what a season. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate you hanging with us here on Facebook Live. We started doing this during football season. We carried it over to basketball. I really enjoyed being here with you guys after the game. It's a fun way to kind of wrap things up and kind of, sum it up and get some things off your chest. And, you guys have had some great comments and reading my recap, and you guys have gotten in touch with me in other places, social media, and emailing back and forth. And it's cool to be here doing this after the games. Really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really appreciate you staying up late with me tonight, by the way. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning as we speak here on Saturday morning, and you guys are up and doing this. So I really appreciate that. And look, all told, I think even after just less than an hour after the game ended here, but, tomorrow and Sunday and as the week goes along here and allegedly spring will arrive, I think all told Syracuse fans are going to be pretty proud of this team and pretty happy with this season. The Sweet 16 run when, you're losing to Boston College at the end of the year and some other moments this season where you're like, boy, I don't know what. Remember when they were 1-4 in ACC play and Jim Boeheim, speaking of Boeheim, was at that press conference and was like, come on, what are you guys worried about? He was Alfred E. Newman. What? Me worry? What are you talking about? Remember, he was like, who cares, right? Hall of Famer turned out to be right because the Orange turned things around and did just enough to get in. I'll say this, though, with kind of a closing thought. Being a bubble team won't be acceptable next year. This is a team that's going to be loaded with talent and is going to be expected to do some big things in ACC play. Syracuse was a bubble team for 4 straight years, and in 2 of those 4 years, they made great runs. In the other 2 years, one, they didn't make the tournament because of a self-imposed ban, and last year they didn't get in. So they made the most out of being a bubble team, but next year, that's not going to be accepted because that's going to be a very, very good basketball team. But there is so much between here and there. We'll certainly be writing about that and talking about that, and before you know it, it'll be another Syracuse basketball season. So we will close there for tonight, and we will close there for the season here on Facebook Live doing Syracuse basketball discussions, but I'm sure more to come on that front. Thanks for hanging with us here. Please read my recap. It'll be up in about 6 hours or so on syracuse.com. All the great coverage from Chris Carlson and Mike Waters and Donna Ditota and our great photographer Dennis Nett in Omaha, getting all the post-game reaction. That'll all be up in the hours to come here, so please spend the weekend reading that. A little plug, Katrina Tulloch and I did a video here on syracuse.com. We kind of answered a writer in Omaha who was taking a shot at our fair town. If you haven't seen that, I think we had a lot of fun doing that video, and I think you guys will get a kick out of that, so check that out on syracuse.com as well. In the meantime, hey, thanks for hanging with us tonight. Thanks for hanging with us all season. Syracuse's season is over, but what a season it was. Losing to Duke tonight, 69-65. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great rest of your period of time till we meet again, my friends, here on Facebook Live. Thanks for hanging with us tonight and all season long.